If you want to know how to jump into real estate investing, but not at the entry level, but at a higher level where you could jump into deals with partners, buy 6 to 8 plex and even more, how to structure them, what's the reality? Well, this is the video for you. But before we get into it, what's up everybody? Welcome to my channel, Better Call Chris, where I share with you tips, tricks, and the winning strategies for you to be able to scale, whether it's in real estate investing, business mindset, and obviously if we need to talk about those subjects, we need to talk about cash, money, riches, abundance, prosperity, and even more. So if those topics, those subjects interest you in any way, shape, or form, you know what to do. Subscribe to my channel right away, right now. So today, actually, it's I did this interview a while ago and I've been procrastinating of putting it out. So today I have somebody that is a coach, a mentor to me. For real, I look up to her. I call her when I have ideas, when I have struggles, when I try to structure my deals. It's somebody that I'm gonna call because she's an OG, and what I mean by that is that she's been doing this for a while. So her name is Terrie. She have a podcast. She also have a book. She's been doing like building managers. She started that business when she was, I think, back in college or something like that. Anyway, she's gonna share with us her story. So I highly suggest to you to stay until the end because she's gonna drop some golden nugget, not a couple, but lots of golden nuggets. But for you, in order to receive all those golden nuggets, you need to stay till the end. And also at the end of this video, I have a little announcement to do. So without further ado, well, wait a minute, before we get into it, if you don't know me by now, my name is Christopher Salador. I'm a top real estate agent, and when I say a top real estate agent, it's just because I've been doing this since 2010 that I'm in the business of real estate, of brokerage, if I can see that like that I'm a real estate broker. And my job, what I'm specialized in, is helping families, people to get richer through the vehicle of real estate. So if you need to sell, buy, or my little thing that I really love is investing. People that wants to invest, people that want to build, create a real estate portfolio, leur parc immobilier, on va dire ça comme ça. Well, if it's something that interests you, it's super simple. Click the link below in the description. You're going to find a link. Click it so you can schedule a meeting with me. And without further ado, let's jump into the video right now. Thank you, Terrie, for coming. For real, it's funny because when I first do the first podcast with Axel, he was telling me about his partner Terrie, and I was like, I thought he was a guy, but I found out you were a girl. And at the same time, I saw everything that you were doing, guys. Podcast, you have a book, you do real estate, and I was like, okay, I need to get this girl into my podcast. Because another thing also is that I realized that there's in this game, this beautiful game world of real estate, there's not too many girls.
That's
but
true.
There's more than people know about, but at the same time, we mostly, the face of the brands are mostly guys. So I was like, you know what, let's shine the light on Terrie. How you doing today?
That's awesome. I'm just gonna jump off what you said, and like, I think it's just like in martial arts. So I have a martial arts career before I got into real estate, or in parallel, and like there are women in martial arts. But a lot of them, their boyfriends or their husbands are also in martial arts.
For real?
And yeah, it's very common for a competitive high level girl to be married to her gym owner or something, right? And like the true self-made woman in martial arts and in real estate is rare. that very often women will get into it, but it's because they're partnering with their husbands or something else. But like a woman who really decided on her own to do it and build it, there's not that many of us.
True.
So
Nice. It's nice to know. And you know what? What I start to do lately is that instead of starting like all the other podcasters about tell us about yourself, blah blah blah, well, how you got into real estate, I flipped it a little bit. Let's start through your real estate journey. Tell us about a moment where you got into a situation and you were like, oh my gosh, why did I get myself into this? And how did you overcome it?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll tell you. Okay. I think I have a situation that I know I'm going to tell you about. But just before that, like, I think it happens to me every 6 months that like I'll come home and I'll be like to my husband, I'm selling everything. That's it. I'm done. I'm selling it. We're moving away. I've had it.
For real?
Yeah. And then, 2-3 hours later, I've calmed down. I'm like, no, actually, I was just upset.
Okay.
But I'll go back and tell you about that. The incident that I want to tell you about. So it was actually my first partnership. And when I get into partnerships with people now, I say, my first partnership was not so awesome. And as a result, I'm leery of how I get into new partnerships now. And so what happened was actually it was an employee that I had who I ended up partnering with. And she worked for me for, I guess, 4 or 5 years. And the relationship was really good. And then we decided to go in on a building together.
Okay.
And we had a game plan, like a 5-year game plan. And after a year and a half, she came to me and she was like, look, Terrie, like, I need the money. Like, with my husband, we're going to buy a chalet. And so we have to sell the building. And I'm like, no, but that wasn't the plan. And I didn't have the money to buy her out.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that was extremely stressful because it was then, I did have a line of credit, but then like I had to go into debt on the line of credit to buy her out. And without a line of sight as to how I was going to be able to pay that money back.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was bad for our relationship. And in a business sense, it was extremely stressful. But then, after pulling it together, and it unfortunately ruined the relationship. So, yeah.
And right now, after all that, do you think it was, for sure, it was a good learning experience, right? Because now with your new partners, like you says, you come in and you ask better questions. You filter more, and now you're the mistake that happened before. Now you know what kind of questions, what mistake to avoid.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I can just sort of, for your audience, like pull this out a little so that it's the takeaway is very clear. Like one of the questions that I learned is important is how much of that person's money are you playing with? And that right now when I partner with people, like I don't want it to be their only $50,000, because that means that their stress level is going to be super high. And it also means that if something else happens in their life, in their family situation or with anything else, they're going to need to get the money out.
For sure.
And then it's not funny. So if you're looking at kind of doing those joint ventures, like some of it is also to realize like what of this person's money are you playing with? And
for sure.
If it's the only money they have, it's going to be very high stress.
Okay. Right now today, how old are you, if I can ask?
You can ask me. I'm 46.
46. And when did you start your real estate career?
Okay, so I started managing properties when I was 19.
19?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I bought my first building at 26.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And what was your first purchase?
My first purchase was a triplex on Adam Street in Hochelaga in 2006. Yeah.
Did you know the area a bit because you're English? Were you born and raised like in the West Side? Yeah,
so I was born and raised in the West Side of Montreal, but against my parents' wishes, I went to Cégep de Maisonneuve, and I did my Cégep there. So I already knew the area. And then when I came to wanting to make that first investment, I actually had Hochelaga in my mind because I knew it was up. I could say it was up and coming. It wasn't really up and coming 20 years ago.
Really not.
But the prices were cheap, and I felt like I could deal with it because I kind of knew the area. So yeah.
And it's funny because I'm Haitian, okay, and it's funny because all the Haitian people, when I started back in 2010, and I was saying to people like, oh, why don't you buy a duplex, triplex in Hochelaga? Hochelaga had so much bad reputation in all the Haitian mind. Like, it was crazy. Nobody wanted to buy. But it's funny because now it's boom and explode, and the prices are crazy now.
Yeah.
And you purchase at the right time. But for sure, your background kind of helped because you started. Tell us about a little bit about your managing career managing other people's assets, buildings, and stuff like that.
Yeah, so that's actually very funny. So I'm from Montreal. I grew up here on the West End, but when I was 19, I moved to Toronto.
Okay.
And I was going to school at University of Toronto, and there was no space in student residence, so I ended up moving into this like crazy student house with 15 rooms that was not managed. So I moved out of my parents' house, and the very next day, my housemates voted me house manager because nobody was like kind of making the rules there. And so I started my management career at 19 in this kind of like rooming house for students in Toronto. And things kind of went from there.
And so you started your own business in that, and how did you find your first client? Because how old were you back then?
So I started that managing when I was 19, and then what happened is I moved after to Vancouver to continue studying, and then I house hacked before people knew what house hacking was.
Okay.
So I got my dad to sign a lease on a big house, and then I portioned out the rooms, rented them to other students, like furnished the house, and paid my way through the rest of university like that.
Were you cash flow?
Yeah, I was. No, I was. I covered my rent because it was a rented property.
Okay.
And then when I moved back to Montreal after, I was like, okay, Dad, like I've been doing this for 5 years. Lend me the down payment on this triplex in Hochelaga, co-sign the mortgage with me, and then I set up the same model there.
And that's how you started.
And that's how I started.
Was it easy to close him, to get him to agree?
Yeah, actually, like to the project itself, he was fine with. Hochelaga, he was like really not okay with.
For sure.
Especially like coming from the West End, like my dad was not having it. But then after I bought it and made it work, we did the second building in Hochelaga 1 year later.
A second building in Hochelaga. Do you still have them, or you sold them?
No, I sold them.
Yeah? Well, why you say that like that? You regret it a bit?
No, I don't. It was like, I got a good piece of advice near the beginning of my career is that a building kind of has a life as an asset in your portfolio. And so I ended up owning three triplexes in Hochelaga, through which I got to financial independence. So it's a fallacy that you need to have a lot of doors to become financially independent. I did it with just 3 triplexes. And then once I'd sort of optimized them and they were at the top of their value and Hochelaga had appreciated, it was just time to trade out of them and get into the 6 and more multifamily.
Okay. And could you explain more about having what you just said, having a building or a few buildings that have a lifetime span in your portfolio?
Yeah, absolutely. So like when you ideally you're acquiring an asset that you have some kind of a strategy to force appreciation. So what are the ways that people force appreciation? One of it is rental optimization, building management. That's my strategy.
Okay.
Some people do it by rehabbing, like renoing and then adding value that way. Or they believe that they're buying in a gentrifying area and that there's a trajectory of gentrification and they want to capitalize on that.
Totally.
Yeah. But then at some point that play is going to be done. And is that play going to take you 2 years? Is it going to take you 10 years? You will know it when you see it. And I knew that in Hochelaga, I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago that I finished selling them off. Like I knew by then Hochelaga was not, their appreciation curve had stabilized.
Okay.
My rents were optimized. The buildings were 100 years old. So like the maintenance issues were going to start coming. And it was just not the right asset for where I was headed.
Okay. And what did you have? What did you had in mind back then of where you were headed?
Okay, so I mean, interestingly, I rode those 3 triplexes for 10 years to financial independence and didn't really have anywhere else to go from there because I didn't understand the multifamily lending game. And my goal was just, I was calculating how long do I have left on my mortgages.
For sure.
So like at one point I'm like, I have like 15 years left on this mortgage. So like when it's paid off, I'm going to be able to stop everything I'm doing and travel the world, right? And then at a certain point, like I started, being part of a real estate community a bit more and understanding that like maybe the goal is not to pay off your mortgage. And maybe these skills that I have as a manager that I've built built over this time can actually make more money if I use a different business model. And then when I realized that, I was like, okay, I need to liquidate these to buy multifamily assets with myself, with partners, and then move on from there.
Perfect. And could you tell us about your first big real estate investment, multi-housing? How much unit was it? And did you have partners? How did you structure that?
Yeah, well, so like the first multi-residential that I did, actually I did 2 at the same time. So I killed...
When it was more easy to do those kind of stuff.
Exactly. But so I sold my first Hochelaga triplex, the one that actually I was living in because I spent 10 years living on the ground floor. So I sold that building, got a nice amount of cash out of it, and then bought 2 8-plexes in Lachine with basically like 3 weeks in between them.
Nice.
Both of those deals popped at the same time. And like I was laughing with my then broker and saying, oh, like, should we put 2 offers on this? Like, I don't know. We'll see. For sure, one will tank at inspection.
Yeah.
And then the further we went, the more I realized that those were 2 good deals and we couldn't let one go. And so then I ended up closing on both of them.
Nice. By yourself?
By myself, yeah, with the money that I got from the sale of the other building.
Oh, okay. And how did you, and after that, what was your next move?
Oh, you're asking me to remember now.
Yeah.
Well, so I had those 3 triplexes to turn over and then build a portfolio with. But if I remember correctly, I think my next move was actually a partnership move because I realized that like that area in Lachine was doing pretty well at that point. And so then the next building was something that I did with a partner. And it was a similar project. It was actually a 6-plex.
Okay.
And so then, yeah, I just kept on buying in Lachine for a while till it got too expensive.
Nice. And then it's funny because right now, how many units do you own? How many doors?
75.
75 with partners also, for sure.
Not
so
all by
like
yourself? About half are myself and half are with partners.
So you went to Lachine, but as I heard in the mastermind group that you have, is that now you're more in the Trois-Rivières like sector. How did you from Lachine went to Trois-Rivières, or what was the next step before getting to Trois-Rivières?
Mm-hmm. So for me, like I always say that like my business strategy is I buy D buildings and bring them up to a D plus or a C minus level. And so I'm always kind of looking for that area that is like in that D plus, D range and is kind of coming up. And at a certain point, that Lachine was at, well, first Hochelaga was that area.
Exactly.
Yeah, then Hochelaga got too expensive. Then it became Lachine for a while. And now Lachine, the rent versus the spread at which you can buy buildings, it's too big for my business model to really function nicely.
Okay.
Once in a while, something still comes, but it's competitive.
Yeah.
Whereas now, I like the fact that in Montreal North and in Trois-Rivières, you can really run that model. The GRMs are around like 14, 15 if I negotiate well. And with that, my business model works.
Okay. Let's go back to, you said earlier that one of your strategies, because of your background managing other people's assets and your owns, that's a quick way to have a turnover in a building to get more revenue and stuff like that. What do you have of like 3 to 5 tricks that you could share with us, that if somebody purchased a building, how it could deal with the tenants and to be able to increase the rents?
Well, I would say the first thing is identifying those properties that have been poorly managed.
Okay.
So for me, like at this point, because most of the buildings that I visit, I have to do a promesse d'achat. I have to have an accepted offer in order to visit them. So like I will be looking, and when I see something that has ratios that look interesting to me, I will make an offer. And then my goal is to go and identify those properties that are poorly managed. Okay. And then the sign of poor management will be, some sort of dilapidation. It will be tenants like that are living in a lot of garbage. Maybe we can't visit all the units because somebody doesn't want to open their door. So it's like kind of a mom and pop investor who has been taken over and the tenants are running the place. Okay. And then like really, I mean, you're asking for 2 or 3 tricks. I really only have one trick, and that trick is understand the laws that are in force in Quebec very well, and then just apply the law. Okay.
And but for most of the people, it's going to be scary to jump into a building that it was poorly managed, like you said. How do you, as a woman, deal with that? Because as we both know it, especially I realize that the higher in the type of building that you go, usually it's people with not a lot of, it's not, en français, it's like, c'est des gens à faible revenu. It's people with not high-end income, with lots of crazy stories, but doesn't it scares you to jump in that and deal with people that gonna challenge you or not pay you and blah blah blah? How do you overcome that, or what's the mindset that you approach when you jump into a deal like that?
Well, so like for me, it's that I'm a professional, and this is what I say in my coaching. You know, like if you even only have one door, behave as a professional, and the way people treat you, they will treat you like a professional.
It's funny. I say the same thing to all my people that purchase the first investment property.
Yeah, absolutely. And so like it's because, for example, like if you're the Videotron person, or if you're the bank, people don't always like what Videotron or the bank or the phone provider has to say to them. But if you remain professional and you interact in a professional way, it's like, when the person from the collections agency calls because you didn't pay your phone bill for 2 months, like that's a certain kind of relationship. And
True.
like I say that also to my tenants. Look, you pay your rent on time and you don't cause trouble, you will never hear from me except to come and repair something. Okay? But if you don't pay, if you cause problems for the other residents, like I'm going to apply the law, because for me, I even want the building to run smoothly for the other people who live there.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay. And through your knowledge and experience, how can we quickly jump into sixplex and more? Because the la valeur économique is going to ask you for more down payment, so you need more liquidity and stuff like that. Not even counting the money that you're going to have to inject to either fix or put the place, to optimize the place. What are your tricks, your tips on that?
So I think the first thing is to really understand the financing ecosystem, because there are banks that will treat those 6 units especially, or even 6 to 8 units, as residential purchases.
True.
And so if you're dealing on island, you can think of RBC or CIBC. They will take a sixplex as residential. So that means you only need to put 20% down. Desjardins will go up to an 8plex with 25% down. So my advice would be, consider for your first multi-residential, like 6 doors and more, consider those kind of programs, because it's going to reduce your down payment. And then if, the minimum I think you need to play in that game now is, between 150 and 200K. And if that sounds like too much, well, then you need to just get together with other people and develop partnerships, network, meet other, investors, and see if you can do a move like that together.
Totally. And from your experience with the partnership, the bad partnership that happened in the past, what are your tips that you could share to anybody that looking to find partners and to jump into investing together?
It's a great question. So I'm going to echo what I said at the beginning of the interview, which is that, understand what of that person's money you're playing with.
Okay.
Because if you are playing with their only $50,000, at some point they're going to need that money, and it's going to be unpleasant. So
for sure.
So that's the first thing. And then the next thing is what I do now, because I have my broker's license and I have also a management company. I like to work with someone before we get into buying a building together.
Okay.
And then I want to see how is that person behaving in business? Because believe me, when I manage someone's property, I'm going to see how quickly do they pay the suppliers? What kind of attitude do they have when I'm giving them advice of how to deal with the tenants? Because very often at this point, I'm the professional who knows mostly like what's going to be the best decision. And if that person that I'm in a partnership with is not very coachable, or is always trying to micromanage me at this point, that's not a good relationship for
sure.
me. But, as everyone else will have different priorities, but the extent to which you can kind of do business with the person before to get to know them, and don't be in a rush. People sometimes they want to do the deal so bad that they're going to get into a partnership no matter what. But like really, a partnership is like a marriage, and you need to treat it like one. So date first.
Date first. I like that. Date first. Perfect. Ben, and how do you manage the assets that you have, the buildings that you have in Trois-Rivières while you still live in Montreal? Because when first-time investors come to me and they're like, "Oh, Chris, I would like to purchase in Shawinigan and Trois-Rivières," I'm like, whoa, stop. Let's buy some. I prefer for them to buy something smaller so they can build their strength, build their mindset, build their toolbox with their first property, and then go and manage something that's further. Because if you don't know those skills, if you don't have that, you didn't got to that level, it's going to be hard managing something when you're not on the field. How do you do it?
So, I mean, like, I can tell you this is going to be kind of like a professional level answer. But for me, I have a boots on the ground manager in Trois-Rivières who is really great. I started off with someone not so great. And what I learned from that bad relationship, which is an example that I could have picked, is to control the data. And so basically, like, my head office in Montreal, my management company manages all of the admin. So we do the lease renewals, we do the rent collection, we have the database, and the guy in Trois-Rivières takes the phone calls.
Okay.
And so this means that because the tenants have a direct line to me, should ever he do anything that I don't like, they're going to call me because they're going to, you know, bring the problems to my attention, and all the payments and the admin I handle myself. So if ever I have to fire him or change managers, it's as simple as making a phone call.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how do you manage doing like renovations and stuff like that? Because that you need to be on the ground.
Well, I have the manager that I have actually is very good with renovations. And I would mention this about secondary markets in general. Like, I wish that he worked in Montreal, because the prices of renovations and the availability of people in Trois-Rivières, it's like you're paying 30% the price and they're available immediately.
Okay.
So it's not, because there's not this construction pressure that there is in Montreal.
Yeah.
It's almost easier to find those people. And in those small markets, reputation matters because everyone knows everyone.
Yeah, it's true.
And if you start talking to people who are active in those markets, they will all be able to tell you the 10 people who do it and which one you should and shouldn't work with.
True.
So
totally.
in a sense, it's simpler to operate in a secondary market than it is in Montreal.
Totally. Could you tell us about the story you told us in your in your mastermind about the place you had in Longueuil, the place you were managing in Longueuil? Because I thought it was a crazy story. But at the same time, you know it like me, it's the reality. Well, if you purchase a place, if you own and you don't structure your tenants, it's poorly managed, you're gonna end up with crazy stuff like that. So could you tell us about what happened?
Yeah, sure. So this was actually a prime example of an investor who bought something that was beyond the scope of her capacity to deal with it. And so she called me, and like my name had been circulating as somebody who could clean up a place.
Okay.
But this was like 10 years ago. Like it wasn't, I wasn't at the professional level that I am now. And so at that time, like this was really a big chunk that I bit off, and she'd lost control. So it was a sixplex, and in the ground floor, there were like these, 4 dudes living together who were like, they had a cocaine problem.
Oh boy.
And so they were on the way out. Above them lived a stripper, like a single mom stripper, who was like also had a cocaine problem and was friends with the 4 dudes.
For sure.
And then on the other side, there was like a guy there was a hoarder, so somebody who stocks like lots of stuff. And then there was another guy who had like had done like anger management stuff, like who had been, I don't know if he went to jail, but he had anger management problems. And so then, like, finally, I got rid of the 4 boys who had a cocaine problem. But then they moved in with the stripper.
Oh, boy.
And so then they were upstairs having parties. And then the stripper had, like, 4 pit bulls. And so there was, like, a backyard that was, like, shared between everybody. And the pit bulls were, like, circling there. So every time I had to go to try to do something or collect rent, like, there were the dogs, like, running around my knees. And then the final crowning jewel of this was that the guy with anger management and the stripper ended up throwing dog poo at each other.
Oh my gosh. It's crazy. Wow.
Yeah. And of course, every time something like that happens, their first phone call is Terrie.
Yeah, for sure.
But then, one of the skills that I developed at that point was also to explain to the tenants that, like, look, you can call the property manager, but if it's burning, you need to call the fire department.
Exactly.
So if you're having a conflict with your neighbor, you need to call the police. Like, I can maybe write a letter, but do you think that the letter is going to stop someone from throwing dog poo at you or peeing off the top balcony down onto your head because they're having a party? I'm not the right person to call.
Big time. It's funny. And let's segue a bit on what would be the tips you would say to anybody that would like to build a portfolio of 30 units, not as fast as possible, but, like in a manageable timeline.
Well, I mean, the first thing is realize that like in Canada or in Quebec, you're not going to do that by yourself. The amount of capital you're going to need to do that is beyond the scope of even what I had. It took me, I've been doing this for 20 years. It's literally taken me 20 years to get to the amount of doors that I have. Could I have done it faster if I had more knowledge? Absolutely. Would it have taken me 5 to 10 years? Yeah, it would have. And so, you need to find other people who can help educate you in terms of understanding how the business works, using business models of acquisition that work. And then you're going to need to make partnerships in order to raise capital. And so like finding a way of meeting those people and then feeling comfortable and actually wanting to do business with them.
Totally. Quick and fast. I like your answer. And what would you say, one last tip, the golden nugget tips that you would say to the younger version of you? For all the younger generation that's listening to us that want to jump into real estate, what would be the golden nugget tip that you would have?
Yeah, don't do it alone. I started the story with the fact that it took me 10 years to get out of my 9 doors. The reason why it took me that long is because I was not surrounded by other people who had already hacked all the problems that I had. And like the growth at every stage of my career, the growth trajectory that I could have had if I had had a good peer group, if I had had a network of people who was doing the same thing, it would have allowed me to see the growth that I've had in the past 5 years. I would have been able to, pull that back 20 years in the past, and then I would own all of Montreal by now.
For real.
So yeah, but peer group and a good network, surround yourself with other people who are in this. Don't try to do it alone.
All right. Thanks a lot. Where people can find you and get in touch with you?
So you can check out my podcast, which is called the Real Escape Investing Podcast. That's available on Spotify and also on Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. And then you can also check out my business website, equitybuildersclub.com.
That's it. Thanks for your time, Terrie.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Boom, boom, boom. What did you think about Terrie? Let's be honest. She is really sharp. She knows her thing. She got experience. She's a woman. She's been through stuff where you could see the experience. But that's me. Tell me in the comments down below, how did you like this video? How did you like Terrie? Did you have any questions? Because you know what I like with Terrie, it's especially her background with managing buildings and stuff like that. And for real, to be honest, I would like to have her to make her come back so she could share with us some tips and tricks about how to deal with tenants, because she have that skills. But especially for people that are starting in real estate, well, it could be something scary, something that for sure we don't know about because we never dealt with it before. But that's the reason why I would like to have her come back to my show. But tell me in the comments down below, would you like Terrie to come back? Did you like this kind of video? And especially I know my channel is in French, but it's my first time that I'm doing it in English. But tell me down below, do you want some more? Because there's plenty of guests, especially in English, that I could come into my show. And I don't know, I think I like that diversity, French, to have a mix of both, because usually the people in French are listening to podcasts, to stuff in English, and less the other way around. But why not? Tell me down below, did you like it? What did you like the show with Terrie? Do you want me to do more? Do you have any special guests you would like to request me to, so I can reach out to them? And any suggestions about topics, people, whatever. And by the way, while you're there, please, if you like that video, drop a like, share that video with anybody you know that video could be in good use. And especially while you're there, subscribe to my channel. It would mean the world to me. And by the way, the announcement, I just want to let you know, okay, I'm doing 2 types of events for now. There's going to be 3, but 2 times for sure. I'm going to have a guest who's going to come and he's going to open his book on how he structured everything in his deal, from the financing, leveraging capital, finding the deal, how the refinance, the takeout, everything. And especially those guests are going to be people that are operating at the highest level. I'm talking about people that do land development, that do new construction, that do value added, but at the real higher level. People that are buying portfolio, that optimizing them, stuff like that. Really like with the big players. So if you're interested, the link's going to be down below. It's going to be called Structure ton deal, structure your deal from A to Z, because with those guests, they're going to open to us their books. They're going to explain to us from A to Z how they structure everything, how they find it, structure the financing, everything. So that's one event. The second event is going to be an event that's going to be more informational, where I'm going to have a guest that's going to come and talk to us about real estate, commercial real estate, land development, stuff like that. But it's going to be more like a type of Q&A and stuff like that. And those events are going to be called value added, but in French it's going to be called création de valeur. So in English it's value added. So that's going to be that second event. So if you are interested in one of those two events or whatsoever, if you're interested or sitting down with me having consultation, if you have something, if you want to build your portfolio, looking for partners, because I'm looking for partners, because I'm doing projects and I'm looking for partners. So if it's something that interesting you in any way, shape or form, the links are going to be down below. And if you want to know more about real estate, watch other videos, tips, tricks, and the best strategies, well, you can watch one of those two videos.